Hi, everybody. Yehuda Shamroth from Ramat Beit Shemesh, Rabbi Pinchas Winston from Telstone, here with Thursday Night Redemption Thursdays. Just a little quick plug for Rabbi Winston, who's written over 100 books on every possible topic from Jewish identity to Jewish history. And specifically, my favorites are his books on the end of days and estimated time of arrival. When is Mashiach coming and how we prepare? End of days, preparing for redemption, and many, many, many others that you will really love. And subscribe to his weekly Parsha, to our Parsha of the Week, Parsha Shavua, and there's programs and there's webinars and there's workshops and all kinds of things on Rabbi's website, 36.org. And there it is there, and Rabbi Winston has it also. And this webinar is sponsored by the Miriam Project Geula Hour with Yehuda Shamroth, that's me, bringthemhome.org, and Israel 365 with Josh Wanderer. And Rabbi Winston, please take over and tell us about how to prepare for Hannukah.
Okay, thank you. A long time ago, when I used to live in America still, actually, at the time, or at least I was there for a while, I was working for Aish Torah at the time, and there was a yearly convention that they had for outreach professionals called AJOP, which stands for Association of Jewish Outreach Professionals. And the idea was to get together to hear speakers and to share tips, because we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to save the same Jewish people. And it was a great way to become more aware of what's going on and be up on things to do with kiruv outreach and things like that. It was actually a very interesting time. A lot of important rabbanim would come and speak, and that alone was worth it. It's actually very well managed too. In the beginning, I don't know what it's like now, but back at that time, basically it was heavily subsidized, and the hotel was good, the food was fantastic, and the company was wonderful too as well. And I remember taking a break in between sessions. It was 3 days. It was over 3 days, and just walking in the hotel to see what else is going on, because it was downstairs where all the convention halls are. So there are more than one event taking place at the same time. I happened to stumble, well, not really stumble, just walked, by the door of someone giving a motivational talk. It was a motivational speaker at a time that it wasn't as popular a thing yet as today. Today, I mean, there's all kinds of motivational speakers, and you go online and you want motivational talks and all that. It's a big thing now, like with mindfulness, all these things like that. But at the beginning, he was one of the originals, and very popular. I had heard his name, never heard him speak before, but I heard about him, and I knew they get like $30,000 for like 2 hours of time or something like that, which is an incredible amount of money. What speakers can get. I was trying to get $250 a night, speaking in a shul, someplace like that. Big difference. And they left the door open, so I was actually able to listen a bit from the door, surprisingly, because people probably paid good money to hear him speak. And he was, going back and forth across the stage, and he was saying all kinds of interesting things. But the truth is, most of what he was saying, I was already familiar with, because a lot of it's in Torah, a lot of it's in Gemara, Torah learning. It was a chiddush. It was a new thing for the people in the crowd, because they don't learn Torah, and they didn't have that type of background experience. So for them, but I just, I thought to myself, it's very interesting how people could spend so much money and pay a person so much money to do something that we should be able to do on our own. Basically, the whole point of being a motivational speaker is to inspire people, is to get them energized to want to do something. It wasn't a program to teach you a skill about how to, to paint or to build something that you can produce something there. It was literally just to produce yourself. It was to find it within yourself, to have the motivation to get up and do something significant, maybe even great. A lot of people, and where I came from, certainly from Aish Torah, that was drilled into us every single day. You can be great. You have to be great. You have to, you have to believe in yourself and trust in Baruch Hu. God runs the world, and my Rosh Hashiva of Noach Weinberg was very big on this. He did just teach us learning and Torah, and he provided a wonderful base medrash of learning. But the most important impact that I saw that he had, aside from all the kiruv that he was able to support and to make possible, which was incredible, But it was this idea. I mean, I'd never heard such a thing before, but we would have these sessions with him, and he would tell us, you can be great. And the idea of, first of all, going to the Talmud, which is a daunting task, 2,700 folio pages that basically are very terse. You have to learn how to learn it first. And the idea of going through that was like a dream that does not come true for most people who have been learning their entire lives. I mean, partly from choice, partly because they focus on other things, but a large part because it's a very, very large project to take on a day-to-day basis. Then, Baruch Hashem, the Daf Yomi program expanded and increased, and more people joined it. So people were going through Shas once every 7 years, which is amazing, and doing it again another time, because you forget things very quickly. But I remember, making my first siyum on the Talmud Bavli, and thinking to myself that that a large part of this was due to the fact that Rav Noach would push us. He would say to me, "You're a Shas man. You're shot. You can do this. You're shot." You have to understand, being a Baal Tshuva, I didn't grow up with Gemara. I didn't learn Aramaic when I was young. I was starting at the age of 20-something to learn Aramaic, and it was so painful in the beginning that I actually pleaded with my mashgiach in the beginning to give me a break, to give me 3 months off before starting with the Talmud, because it was like word by word, idea by idea, and that was before we even got a chance to learn the Gemara that much. I can still see it from that time. And eventually, Baruch Hashem, I got a break. First of all, he gave me the 3 months off, and I came back. I got a second break, and that was the fact that I was assigned a tutor because I was teaching on behalf of Rav Noach for a couple of weeks because it was fundraising, and they would stick us in to fill his shoes, so to speak, a little bit, not really. But because of that, it took time from my learning schedule. So therefore, to help me out, they gave me a personal tutor, and he was a wonderful person, a wonderful teacher that really lit the fire under me to learn Gemara and showed me so many different aspects of it that stuck ever since that point in time. And eventually, I realized that I had to see more of it on my own. And I, as I say, broke my teeth and worked on it very much. But inspiration, that was Rav Noach was inspiring. I mean, lots of people are inspiring. There's lots of very inspiring people. I mean, I've been to lots of talks and different types of inspiration, but he had this one inspiration that I never really heard replicated anywhere else that stuck with a lot of us. And I think is one of the reasons why a lot of people have accomplished some fantastic things over the years on behalf of Eshet Torah, on behalf of themselves, because this idea that you can be great. I didn't understand at the time that all he was really doing, which was a big task, was putting us in touch with our souls. Your soul, interesting enough, is like that black stallion running free in the countryside that is so powerful that if you can get the harness on him and channel that energy, you break the horse in, so to speak, you can ride for days on the same horse and accomplish so much. Just powerful energy. And that's your neshama. Your neshama is a powerful source of energy that, when unleashed, you can't even begin to imagine. When we talk about miracle workers, right? The Gemara is filled with stories of miracle workers. The Leshem explains that to be able to survive the destruction of the Second Temple and remain the Jewish people, God gave the power of miracles to the rabbis at that time. Not just anybody, great leaders, but they could do. And you open the Gemara and you read the stories in Tainus of Rabbi Chanan ben Dosa and other stories as well. And it just seemed like everyday stuff, to do another miracle. Not everybody. Rameir Balanes, he's famous. What does it mean? Rameir, the one who does miracles, the owner of miracles. He could do them at will. It was a very unique period of time in history for the sake of Jewish survival, and therefore God allowed these people to be able to perform miracles at will, just when they wanted it. If they were hungry, they didn't have to order in or prepare something. They could use Kabbalah to make a cow or something, whatever was necessary, to take care of their food needs at that time. And the way we look at it is like, yeah, a miracle. Mount Sinai, the giving of Torah, and miracle. What a miracle is a supernatural thing. So you click your finger, like this, or you think something, or use Kabbalah, or you say some kind of incantation, and poof, the thing happens. And it doesn't happen naturally, so it's called a miracle. It's called supernatural. But there's a mechanic, to all of it. There's a technical reality. It's not just like it just out of midair. It may look like that to the average person, but really that's the neshama. The soul has that power. So why don't we see that? Why don't we recognize that? Because the body is very physical. It's very instinctual, and it doesn't believe because it doesn't have the wherewithal to believe. It's like a car, and it's driven by the person. But cars go to control also. It's a little bit different than a car because a car doesn't have instinct. I mean, they try to program with instinct. The modern cars that drive themselves and coming closer, but it has a certain level of intelligence to it that really. Not so much intelligence, has no free will of its own, that's for sure, right? But it's part of the free will picture because it provides a certain amount of input, sensory input into our lives, and then we make a decision based upon the sensory input plus what our seichel knows to be true or not true for that matter. But because of the body, it becomes a overwhelming experience just to be spiritual. So one of the greatest quotes I've heard. Because it's just so nicely put, certain things. That was also a talent of Rav Hannukah as well. He had an ability to sum up important ideas in one statement that really zeroed in on the main point. For example, he would say things like program or pogrom. Very simple, very short. What did it mean? The Jewish people are not developing programs to A, keep people in the fold, and B, bring them back to the fold if they left. Then chas v'chalila, it ends up becoming a pogrom at some point in history because that's how God brings us back in the end. So that was one of his catchphrases that we have to do outreach, we have to do kiruv, be involved. You can't say it's not my problem, it's not my business. It will all come back to us in the end. And I forget who actually made the statement. I meant to look at before I sat down tonight, but the statement was basically this: we are not physical beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience. I mean, it's brilliant the way it's put. And it really sums up Hannukah tremendous. I mean, it sums up all of life. This was the fundamental disagreement between the Greeks and the Jews, between the Hellenists and the Prussian. This was the underlying basis of the disagreement between Noah and his generation. And it's the disagreement right now in our generation as well. Because the difference is that if we're physical beings having a spiritual experience, then it's not so important to be spiritual. You can be spiritual. It's available to be spiritual, but being a physical being means that we're in a physical world. This is it. A physical being having a spiritual experience implies there's no world to come. Because why would there be? I mean, this is it. This is the world. This is all there is. So therefore, there's some people who want to be spiritual and some who don't. You can't criticize because we are physical beings, and therefore, being physical beings, life is very sensory, and we get pleasure from physical things, and that's what it means to be a physical being. The other way around is different. Spiritual being having a physical experience means that we are essentially a soul. We are essentially, and that's what the Rizal says on the first page of Shar Gilgulim and other places as well. You are your soul. You're not your body. You're not your soul. Your personality right now in this world is a combination of your body and your soul because it's always in flux. Sometimes you're like this, sometimes like that. You can change based upon the combination, the mixture. But you in essence are the soul. And if you're a spiritual being having a physical experience, it means there is a world to come, and the priority has to be the spiritual. But you can enjoy the physical, and you can use the physical to accomplish spiritual things, but the priority is the spiritual. And that's what the Jewish people have been assigned the task of teaching the world. And some people get it, and some people don't. And even us, religious Jews, don't always act consistent with that. For example, that we get overly involved in materialism. This is Yaakov is a twin brother of Esav, as we spoke about earlier, and therefore we can be just like Esav. We can shop until we drop. We can have all the gushers, all the bells and whistles, and still be religious. But sacrifice and spirituality, as the Gemara says in Brochas very clearly, you can't eat at two tables at the same time. Materialism, no matter how much you convince yourself otherwise, will always come at the cost of spirituality. The question is how much you need, because as the Gemara says, "Ein kemach ein Torah." If you don't have flour, you can't eat. So you have to get the flour. But it's going to cost you learning time. But that's okay, because if you don't take the time from learning to go get the flour, you're going to die. And if you die, you're certainly going to cost your learning time. So we make sacrifice. Just like, for example, breaking Shabbos, save a life, right? You can't break Shabbos, but to save a life you can. You know why? Because it's worth it to break one Shabbos to save this life, so this person can live and keep many Shabbos after this. So life is always a cheshbon. It's always a, what they call a life balance. It's just a question of what's in the balance, what's in the scale, what you're fighting for in the end. But the most important point, right, is this idea of inspiration that comes from the soul. We talk about chen. Hannukah is Hannukah, right? Chen on Chof Hey, Kislev. There's a chen. Noach matzah chen b'nei Hashem. Noach found grace in the eyes of God, and we've spoken about this several times before in the past, about how important that single little verse is at the end of Bereshis. God is exercising judgment, severe judgment on the entire world at that time. He's going to bring a flood to wash it all away, all of his handiwork, including the animals too, not the fish, but the animals too, right? And Noah is surviving. He's going to survive the flood. Why? Because he found chen in the eyes of God. Eyes, God, right? That tells you something. That if someone's giving you a seminar, about how to survive financially, right? And in the course of this, you have to invest in the stock market, perhaps not all your money. You have to buy some property. You have to do this, do that, and he just happens to throw it along the way. And by the way, this is very good for making $1 million. Next topic is hold on a second. That's very good for making $1 million. That's we're talking about it. That's crucial. Talk about that. We're talking about surviving the flood. We're surviving life, surviving history, surviving the war of Gog and Magog, Cheled Mashiach, World War I, World War II, whatever you have to survive. And it says, you know how? Noach matzah chen b'nei Hashem. Because Noach matzah chen, this chen aspect, that's what he had. That's what God saw in him. He survived strict judgment at a time that God does not normally show mercy. It's not the time for it. It's not like he's having a temper tantrum. God forbid, he doesn't do that. This is the time for the world requires judgment and punishment, divine, retribution, whatever you want to call it. But Noach survives it because he has a thing called chen. There's a reason why chen is also the root of the word Hannukah and chinuch, which means education, because it's this all-important idea. Now we're familiar with it, because we hear people use it all the time. Well, that child's got a chen. Well, that really chen the person is like, but the way we tend to use it is more like, it's like they're just nice to be around. But the truth is that is a very important aspect of it. Now, it's one thing to want to be around somebody because they have a lot of money. That creates excitement. This, somehow they have all this power. They can make statements and change the stock market. And this is, but it's not the person. It's the money. It's the power. It's not the person you really respect. They're just the vehicle for it. Because a lot of people could become very financially successful and powerful without even changing their traits. They're nicer, more powerful individuals in the world who don't have nearly the financial impact in the world that these people have. Mazel has a major part to play in a person's financial success and prowess. But when somebody just by being themselves, just by being who they are, they just naturally have this ability to be somebody that, like, they're magnetic. They like Yosef. I mean, people came out to see Yosef walk down the street, and people think it's because he was so handsome. But you have to understand, Yosef was in a place that no one looked like him. He didn't fit in. He was not considered to be attractive by the Egyptian standards, even though it says he was an attractive person. The Zohar speaks about it, what it actually means. Technically speaking, it's different by Rochel and Leah because we're talking about Yaakov, who's they're in the same part of the same world. So why did they climb the walls to see Yosef? What was so impressive about Yosef? Because he was Mr. Chen. As Yaakov points out, as the Torah points out, as Rashi explains in Parshas V'yechi by the Brochas, he was a tremendous source of chen. But what was it? This week's Parsha, you see everywhere Yosef goes, he's got this effect on people. He's magnetic. People are drawn to him. They want to see him, want to be around him. Because when you're in the presence of a Yosef type person, you feel your own source of chayim. You feel your own neshama, your own soul, your own inner power. And that's one of the most fantastic things about inspiration. And how many times have you sat through something that, even if you didn't intend to be inspired, but by watching it, somehow it touched something inside of you that said, yeah, I got to do that too. I got to push myself a bit more. I have to accomplish my, you hear a story about someone and there's sacrifices, and you say, well, if they're going to sacrifice their life like that, then I should do similar thing as well. And it changes you. And then once you get into that, by the way, it's very hard to go back. Once you've tasted that inspiration, tasted that greatness, because that's what the Yetzer Hara wants to stop. And he very clever, because you know why? One of the ways that he does it, this requires a little bit of some background information, but we can't go through the whole story. But just the point that I want to bring out right now, which is what the Leshem also makes a big deal about, explains, is that as a result of what happened prior to creation, on God's way to making a perfectly imperfect world that could support the concept of evil, so that we could have free will, there was an influx of evil into creation because of it. And there's different levels of reality. We see that. A person could be on this level, they walk the same earth, in the same physical plane. But spiritually, their head's someplace up. We don't put the guy's head's in his clouds. His head's in the clouds. What does it mean? Well, it can mean he's spaced out, but it can also mean that they're on a much higher spiritual level. You can talk to them, but their interests and their priorities are very different than yours, unless you're as spiritual as they are. But the world itself became a mixture of evil, and on the level, the spiritual plane that most of us live on today, and have for some time, it's not only a mixture of good and evil, but the evil isn't the majority. The next level up, it's balanced between good and evil, and the level above that, it's more good than evil. The level above that, there's no evil whatsoever. That's the way it's explained ever since, going back to the time of, especially Adam's chet, of eating from the tree of knowledge, good and evil. So the world we're living in right now is mostly evil. There's more evil in the world. Not only that, the lesson explains, but because of this, he says, this is why people fall for the trap of often seeing good as evil and evil as good, which is clearly the case today. I mean, people are fighting for it. People want to have, as a way of life, as a government and how to run the world from a Torah perspective is evil. I mean, they're not evil necessarily themselves, but it goes against the mandate for creation. That's called evil. There's innocent evil too. There's evil that happens as a result of people are just mistaken. And that can destroy the world in the end, because the world can only handle so much of that. So he said that a lot of people, he said the only way around that really is to, first of all, never trust yourself until the day you die, to always get advice and direction and outside opinions from people who know the truth about life, which basically means from Torah. And not just that, but also just pray to God for mercy. They should help you see the truth. That's how concerned we're not. I get up in the morning and I do my thing. I assume that whatever I do, I can see truth. That what I see is the truth. And if I don't like it, if it's the wrong thing, I won't do it. But it's very easy all day long to be tricked by the Yetzer Hara. So much so that the Yetzer Hara can flip the whole thing on its head, meaning that he takes a firm idea, takes a Torah concept, and he secularizes it, he Hellenizes it. So what do the Greeks do? The Greeks also, they promote excellence. That's a Greek thing. The Olympics came from Greece. The Greeks were but it was physical excellence. It didn't demand spiritual excellence. It didn't demand character development. People were born with certain physical attributes that made them beautiful or handsome or strong and powerful, and they developed themselves, and then they competed, and they got the little thing in their head, the olive branch thing up, and that was excellence, because they are physical, having a spiritual experience. And compared to our leaders, the ones that we put up on a pedestal, who don't even want to be there, are the Gedolei Hador, the greatest Torah scholars, the Tzaddikim, right, who don't look very strong, powerful, physically, yet the impact they have on creation is far greater. Not because they physically move things, but they spiritually move things. If you could draw it, in a sense, this is what the Gemara means when it says, at the end of days, God will take the Yetzer Hara and he's going to shecht. He's going to slaughter the Yetzer Hara right before the righteous and the evil. And the righteous are going to cry and the evil are going to cry. And the righteous are going to cry and say, wow, it's so big. It's a good thing we didn't know it was so big at the time that we were living in this world, because we probably couldn't have fought it. And the evil look and they see its little hair. They go, wow, it's so small. If we had known it was so small, we wouldn't have done all the sins we did and lost it on the world to come as a result of it. Oh, what a mistake. How did that happen? So what was it, big or small? Well, the question is, it depends on your perspective. If you are a spiritual being having a physical experience, then you can transform the mountain of Yetzer Hara into a hair. But if you're a physical being, have a spiritual experience, then you're a sitting duck for the Yetzer Hara to do whatever it wants. It's just going to be too hard, too powerful. I mean, how many Bali Tshuva, how many people before they became religious thought I would never, ever, ever live a Torah life? They didn't even know what it was half the time. But when they saw religious people, they saw literally like people walking with chains on their hands and their legs and their heads and their whole bodies, because they were meshubad to Torah and to law, halacha, and a way of life, Shabbos, Yant. They couldn't go skiing on Shabbos like a secular Jew might do. They couldn't do all they were bound. And then for some strange, bizarre reason, at some point in time, they merited to stumble. It's a miracle how it happens, but they somehow, against all logic, against family pressure, they get involved in Judaism to the point they start to take on the mitzvahs and keep Torah, and they will tell you they've never felt freer. The Luchos, at Mount Sinai, Moshe Rabbeinu is on top of the mountain receiving Torah from Hashem. The 10 Commandments, the two Luchos, which is going to break very soon. Down below in the camp is the mixed multitude telling the Jewish people that these are the gods that brought you out of Egypt. Come on, they just made them. They just popped out of the oven. What are you talking about? We may want to do what you're doing, but we're not that stupid. At least, essentially reasonable. They weren't saying that these were there, but the concept behind the golden calf. Gold is like eternal. A calf is without a yoke, right? It's like represents complete childhood type, freedom. Do whatever you want, whenever you want to do it. And this is why you left. You left Egyptian slavery not to become a slave to somebody else or anything else. You came out to be free, to have to do what you want in the physical world, to be a physical being, having a spiritual experience. That's what it was all about. And then Moshe comes down with the luchos, that it says that the commandments were charut, they were engraved on the tablets. And the Mishnah says, Al tikrei charut ela cherut. Don't read engraved, but cherut, freedom. Freedom is engraved on those tablets. Which one is it? A machlokas. It's an argument. You get the golden calf, and the golden calf folks down below say, this is freedom. And then you've got Moshe Rabbeinu coming down with the luchos and all the commandments and saying, this is freedom. They're both arguing that one is free. Which is the real freedom? Well, it depends. What do you want to be? What do you want to accomplish? You want to be inspired? You want to be great? You want to know at the age of 80, 90, today people are living, until 90s, maybe even 100. Do you want to know when it's all said and done? A person mentioned to me recently, he's around the same age as me, basically, and he's talking about somebody who had passed away recently, and you don't know. You don't know how long you're going to last for. So a person can go at a moment's notice, or a person can go very shortly, but there's no guarantees you're going to live a long life. So what are you doing with your time? Yeah, you're learning a bit, doing mitzvahs, davening, raising a family, running a parnasa, but what's your greatness? What will they say about you when you leave this world? The Gemara says you can tell who's a ben olam haba, someone who's destined to go to the world to come, by what they say in a eulogy about that person. And you can tell when people are like reaching to say things that are nice, but it's not really true, because people know they knew the person, and I didn't see that. And you can tell when it's emes, when it's true. And those things are the person's personal greatness. And you have to be inspired to be able to do that. So next week, B'ezras Hashem, starting Sunday night, we will light the Ner Shel Hannukah, and they're beautiful unto themselves. I mean, just the whole experience of lighting the Ner Shel Hannukah. But the Bnei Yisachar says that there are 4 places that God hid the primordial light of creation. The one that he, on the first day, it's not the light we have today. Today we have the sun, the moon, the stars, incandescent lighting, fluorescent light, LED lighting. Those are all physical lights. They're all physical, photons and waves, and it's all physical. But the Or HaGenuz, which is the basis of Torah in our souls, that's a completely spiritual light that's so powerful, it's so sublime, it's so supernal, that with that light, you can literally change reality at will. Because on that level, reality is flexible. It's not as concrete. It's only concrete down here if you're living in the physical world of a physical being having a spiritual experience. And the whole story of Hannukah is a bizarre story. Because it's miraculous. What's the story about? The story tells you that really the Greek army, which is massive and powerful and well-armed, went to war against a handful of people who literally shouldn't have been able to get out of their front door without being killed or captured. And they go ahead and they win the physical war. And that's not even the main miracle that we celebrate on Hannukah. And then they go, same thing happened. It's a replication on a different level. They go to the base of Mikdash because they finally got back to Temple Mount, so they want to re-sanctify. That's what we Jews do. First chance we get, we sanctify the base of Mikdash, the temple. And even though it didn't have the same holiness as the first temple, but still it's the base of Mikdash, the house of God. And they go, and they want to light the menorah. And they only find one jar of oil with the seal of the high priest of Kohen Gadol telling us that it's pure. And tradition tells us that this oil itself has a history. It wasn't just made recently. It goes back to Yaakov Avinu. Someone told me this week it might go back to God Naden. It might go back to Noach when the Yonah brought back the olive. No, it's a history, and all the miracles that happen in Tanakh happened with this oil, including Moshe anointing the Mishkan and the Kohanim, and the oil never depleting. So it's completely miraculous, and they find this jar of oil. It's unseen, untouched by the Greeks. Everything else is broken, smashed, defiled. Now, you can use defiled oil for the menorah if you have to. You don't have to stop lighting the menorah. So they could have had 1 day of pure oil, and then they could have had 7 extra days of impure oil after that until they produced more pure oil to continue on with the halacha and the ideal way. So it wouldn't have interfered with the lighting of the menorah. But nonetheless, God performed this, or at least allowed this miracle to occur. He performed it too, right? Where the oil burned for 7 extra days. And what is this all over again? This is a small amount of people defeating the Greek army. In other words, we're being told the numbers don't make a difference. Like we spoke about last week, about Esav is being called kash, he's being called straw. Meaning that, straw can consume a lot of space, take up a lot of space, and seem like it's overwhelming. But just one match, boom, in a very short period of time, all this stuff burns up and it's gone. And that's what's going to happen to Esav. But let's face it, straw is straw. Straw is flammable. It's not dangerous per se. It's not an attacking enemy. It's not a powerful nation. It's just straw. So yeah, you can burn it up. But Esav has descendants all around the world, Russia, America, England, Canada. His descendants are all over the place, and they're very powerful nuclear powers. And you're going to tell me that's straw? I mean, we're afraid. We're intimidated because we see all this power. And Hannukah says, nah, you're coming at it as a physical being having a spiritual experience. Hannukah says you have to be a spiritual being having a physical experience. That's what the Perushim were. That's what they were about. Now, how did they get there? How were they inspired to do that? How were they able to get to a point where they didn't run in the other direction? Because that's what they could have done, by the way. Like a lot of people have done in the past. They could have simply picked up and run in the opposite direction and abandoned Eretz Yisrael and the base of Mikdash and come back another day like many people probably did do and wanted to do, but they didn't. They stayed and they fought because it's Eretz Yisrael. It's not the diaspora, it's Eretz Yisrael. They fought for the land, for the base of Mikdash. But where did the inspiration come from for that? because that's what the Ner Shel Hannukah is telling you about. That's what it's trying to do. And I mean, personally, I find the Ner Shel Hannukah, especially in Israel, because we light in the streets over here, not in the windows of their living room or the kitchen or someplace else like that, right? So you walk through the streets at nighttime, it's dark, and there's light from the street lights, but the Ner Shel Hannukah lighting one entrance way after another is just very powerful. But even just your own, especially on the 8th night, the 36th candle, which of course always lose the Organ news, but it's not just the light. There's something about it. I believe, and we're told the same thing as well, that something spiritual is happening. When you light those candles, especially according to the halacha, and you use Shemen Zayas, even though wax is okay, but Shemen Zayas is the ideal because that's what the miracle was done with, that it changes the world. It's not just a commemoration. It's not just a thing we do. Just like the Haggadah is not just an event, a remembrance of what once took place. When you get into the Haggadah, you get into a portal that supersedes time and the physical reality. And if you really knew how to use it, you could be far more impactful on the world and world rectification. If you knew how, rather than just be a passive attendee at the Seder. The same thing. There's something mystically, magically happening with the Ner Shel Hannukah, and you look into those candles and you recount all the nisim that Hashem has done for us. It's not just saying thank you, and that's a major. Let's face it. That's a major component of Hanukkah, saying thank you, and thank you is so important. The Koros Tov is the basis of everything, because without a Koros Tov, you can't have humility. Without humility, you can't be a conduit for the light of God. As God says about people who are gaivadik, have pride, not enough room in the world for both of us. So what does God do? He goes. I mean, sometimes he takes people out as well, and they go instead. But a lot of times he has to putting. He goes into hiding, so to speak, because of the gaiva, the pride of people. It's unnecessary. The Kliyakar shows how all the implements, all the vessels used in the Mishkan, all came back to teach you one particular trait, and that was anava, humility. Moshe Rabbeinu was the humblest man who walked the face of the earth. The Torah is not telling you he was a good guy, and he was a very humble person, despite the fact he could easily have been gaivadik. He could have been overly proud and arrogant. He was humble. The Torah is telling you why he was such a powerful individual, why God was prepared to talk to him face to face when other prophets had to be unconscious when it took place, why God performed miracles, why God allowed the Organ news to flow through him into the world, because of his humility. Because it's like being a clean pipe. God can work right through you. And when that happens, you become extremely inspired. Because the inspiration is not ours. The inspiration that we have is deciding that I want to be great, not greater than him or her, not in comparison to something else, but in comparison to myself. I have this powerful soul inside of me, because that's what the oil represents. The Shemen Zayas is inside the olive. If you take an olive off the tree and you squeeze it with your head, you're not going to get much oil. If you eat the olive right off the tree, you won't get much taste. Well, you get a lot of taste, but bitter. Doesn't taste good at all. But instead, right, you take that olive and you squeeze it, and beautiful yellow oil starts to emerge, and then you can light it and provide light into the world. And it's just got this, looks like a soul, just a little soul, like, it's come out. The oil, like the word neshama, Hashem means the oil. It's the same letters as neshama, Mishnah, which is also hidden inside the Gemara. It's like a soul, this inner reality. That's what you're doing. When you light the Shemen Zayas, the Ner Shel Hannukah, you are releasing that spiritual being into the world. That's supposed to be you. That's supposed to inspire you. That's supposed to put you in touch with your own personal greatness. So we have this equation that I've been alluding to the last couple of weeks and actually speaking about. 25 plus 11 equals 36. And I have a book called The Light of 36. I have other books, The Big Picture, a bunch of books that go into detail about this number, this equation. You can read them and get more details. But in short, just briefly, 25 is the number that represents the light that God uses to inspire us and to run this world and to perform all the miracles while it's still hidden creation. Where do you know this from? Well, a lot of sources, but primarily when God makes the light, it says, God said, let there be light, there is light. The gematria of the word Yehi, which means, let there be light, let there be, is Yud plus He plus Yud, which is 25, telling us that the number 25 alludes to the light, which is why the Shema has 25 letters, and Hannukah is on the 25th day of the month. 25 is a number that shows up in Tanakh. Ko Amar Hashem, the gematria of Ko is 25. There's lots of instances always alluding back to this light, but it's hidden. And then 36 is the number that usually is associated with the revelation of this light, which is why we light 36 candles all together, because you're revealing the light. And every time that you do something in the world that somehow reveals this light through what you do, what you say, how you act, it is a 36 somewhere associated with it. So, but Yaakov Avinu, for example, he's away from home for 36 years. He's married to Rochel, who dies at the age of 36, with discussion we mentioned, I think, last week. Leah, the gematria of Leah is 36, and there's 36 is all over the place, and the Hannukah candles heal him from his wound. It goes on and on. But the most important 36 is after Adam Arishon eats from the Eitz Das Tov Ra, and he hides, accomplishing exactly the opposite. He was acting like a physical being, having a spiritual experience when he's supposed to be a spiritual being, having a physical experience, and he hides. It's not really God who hides, it's man who hides. And it looks like God's hiding because we're hiding instead. And God says one word, ayeka. And the Medrash says ayeka. What's ayeka? Where you look at the dictionary, where's ayeka? Eicha. Same letters, 100%. Ayeka, where are you? Just Eifata. Where are you? There's lots of other words. Ayeka. It doesn't show up anywhere else in Tanakh or in the world for that matter, just there. And the Medrash says because it's a gematria. Aleph, Yud, Chov, Hey. 36. Now, because the light that shone for Adam Arishon before it was hidden, it's actually hidden twice, but the second time it came back for curtain call, Erev Shabbos, it shone for the 12 hours of Erev Shabbos, the Gemara says, and 24 hours of Shabbos, 36 hours altogether. And then why is 36 significant? Well, that's a shir unto itself. Really, because you imagine the word Elah from the name Elohim, and the Yud Mem stands for Bina. It's Kabbalistic, but it's not coming from nowhere. In all points of direction. Tikkun Olam, rectification of the world, to transform the world back into a spiritual reality that's having physical experience. We don't really have the same type of inspiration when it's the other way around. It's very hard when you're living as a physical body, and when you're living with physical, you're physically limited in what you do, and once in a while something might mystically happen that's a little outside the box. You go, wow, that was a miracle, that's amazing, and you don't consider that's what should be. That's the norm. That's what should be the norm, and once was the norm. Then it's very hard to be inspired. It's very accomplished, not at all. But a person understands, it's like, it's like being chained up. When the said, how many years into this point in time? It's like literally, I haven't accomplished. I couldn't be myself, and now I'm free. That's what that little candle, light flickering on the wick there, on near Hannukah, just like the base of Mikdash. That's flickering, pointing upwards towards Shemayim, saying, "Remember, spiritual being because experience." And the moment that you realize this, but not just over here, but also down here, it gets down to the heart. Your world's going to change. You cannot begin to imagine how you can't. Unless you've experienced those changes and seen it for yourself. You might see miracles happen for somebody else. Wow, that is a lucky day. Miracles happening for people. There's a whole other reality. There's a whole other level of reality happening for people that we don't take note of, and we just assume doesn't exist. Even the Holocaust, as has been pointed out, that other than the Holocaust, if people tried to live a diet that the Jews had for years and the conditions, the health, most of us would a couple months earlier. It was physically impossible. They just kept pushing the envelope. couldn't understand that. It really chose the wrong people to experiment because it's not work for everybody in the world. And yet somehow we survived. Not everybody, because, but still, those who did because that's the Jewish people. In fact, the Leshem explains that every birth, they're all miraculous. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, they're all miraculous births. And Shvati, miraculous births. And the way they happen, and the story, the history, and by leaving Mitzrayim, so miraculous. That's the Jewish people. I mean, somehow we became so pragmatic over time that we dropped all the miracles. We just became everybody else. Just the rest of the world doing the Jewish thing. Chaval. And it's so limiting. And it also forces God to have to bring the redemption on our behalf, which is not the ideal way of doing things in the end, especially since we'd like to participate in that process. So next week we still have Hannukah. We'll still have a shir B'ezras Hashem during Hannukah, and we'll bring this a little bit more home. Finalize the idea and finish it off. But in the meantime, when you light your Nesher Hannukah next week, that's what you have to focus on. And think about it and take it to heart and have discussions. The half an hour you sit around letting the candles burn to be nene from the light and see what's going on. And participating in the whole miracle. It's a thinking holiday. It's a thinking and thanking holiday. And consider and ask yourself, if I were to be great, what would I look like? What would I do? What would I accomplish? Forget about the how even. That's one of the most intimidating things that people have is the how. I can't see how, so it doesn't work that way with God. The how is his business. The if is our business. The what is our business. We have to decide how we want to become great for the right reasons, not to compete, not to make it on the cover of some magazine, not that your neighbors will say, wow, he's a great person, she's a great person. That you can say, I've done something. I've used my life. I'm accomplishing something. But most important of all, the most wonderful thing about this type of greatness is not the greatness itself. It's the feeling of God residing on you, being connected to you, because it becomes imminently clear that when you become great in this way, it's not you. It can't be you. It's not possible. It's God saying, oh, this person's ready to grow. Let me help him. Because that's what the Gemara says. The person comes to purify himself, they help him. The person comes to sanctify himself a little bit, they will sanctify him a lot. But that initial inspiration, that initial, that Yosef spark, so to speak, that's what turns Asaph into Kash. That's what undoes the power of the Yetzer Hara. That's what unleashes the soul of a person until they themselves become a Ner Shel Hannukah. So, Shabbat Shalom, meantime, and as I say, Hannukah Sameach, and B'ezras Hashem, hopefully we'll see you next week.
That was wonderful. Thank you very much, Rabbi Winston, and we'll see you next week. And happy good Shabbos, everyone, and happy Hannukah to you coming up soon. Thank you very much.